Good evening, everybody. It's 9:30 on the East Coast, 6:30 on the West Coast on a Monday night. That must mean it's time for your weekly Calamity Jane livestream. James, how are you doing on this officially spring Monday evening?
Oh, it is official, huh? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
well, it's been official, what, for 2 weeks now or so?
No, I don't know. It depends. Spring is different. Like, there's meteorological spring. There's spring that we understand it to be. I don't
Yeah.
know. It doesn't even matter. I think the first day of spring was officially the 21st or the 22nd.
Oh, okay. All right. For
So,
me, if I guess I greet spring with a bunch of sneezing because of
oh,
allergies. So, yeah, I sneezed once or twice last week, so
oh yeah,
it
yeah,
must
yeah.
be, yeah. So
Allergy
for me, it's
spring.
that's spring enough.
Yeah,
So,
for
but
sure.
yeah, that's a long-winded, windy way of saying, yeah, I'm doing just great. How are things over for you over in Atlanta? I mean, Georgia, that is, not Atlanta. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'm in the vicinity of Atlanta, not exactly in Atlanta. As we who live in this area say, I am OTP, outside of the perimeter. That is what a loser city this is.
Um,
That we judge people by whether or not they live inside or outside of the perimeter
I
of
think
a
ever. Yeah.
bizarre interstate.
Yeah, I mean, LA's got that kind of a lingo too. Although there's not
Yeah.
really, I don't consider it city, hierarchy as much. Although obviously, talk about Beverly Hills and all that stuff for one area, but then there's the Valley, or there's just West LA.
Yeah.
There's always
Yeah.
pockets, or South Bay.
Yeah, I mean that exists in Atlanta too.
Mhm.
It's you've got Decatur, which is a big spot, College Park, and Brookhaven. There's a bunch of different boroughs, Midtown, downtown, that kind of stuff. So it's all the usual
Hmm.
stuff. But Atlanta is a bizarre city. But what are we working on tonight, James?
All right, let me share my screen. We will continue from last week. So I set up this scene where Calamity's running up these steps, and then she turns around to prepare for the Warhog that's going to, pretty much has been chasing her for a couple of scenes. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll work on this new pose here, and I'll borrow again from some old assets from before, and see where I get to tonight.
All right, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
so Atlanta is just one of those places. So for anybody who doesn't know anything about the city, it is, when I say perimeter, there is a very strange, I mean, it's called an interstate, though it does not cross state lines, that loops the city, called 285. And it is the weirdest thing because there are parts of the city where when you look at the junction signs, those big green signs that they put over,
yeah.
you will
Yeah.
go, it'll be like one lane for north 285 and the other lane for west 285, and you're like, what does that mean? Basically, because the whole thing is a loop, right? There is a point where the road stops going east west and it starts going north south, but it's in that transition area that it gets very confused all of the time. I actually don't know how anybody drove in the city before the advent of Google Maps. Honestly, it is an
Yeah.
absolute nightmare. But yeah, so I live outside of the perimeter, which just basically means I do a lot of driving. But whatever. I lived in LA for long enough that you get used to it ultimately.
Yeah. Yes. Um,
Atlanta's.
LA prepares you for all kinds of winky dinky kind of stuff like that, I'm assuming. But
Mm,
then again, like what you're describing to me is it seems pretty unique to where you live. So yeah, I don't know. Um,
yeah, yeah, a bizarre interstate that doesn't cross state lines. It is in fact just a loop around the city. It's a unique one. I mean, I've lived in a lot of places. I've moved around. I mean, I've visited even more.
uh-huh.
And that 285 is amongst the weirdest in terms of like road topology or geography or urban planning or whatever. I don't know.
Hmm.
But yeah, so anyway, I don't know that really had an ending. I don't think that was going anywhere. I think it was
You
just
you just adding local
providing a
local
little local
knowledge to.
color. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah, yeah. Anyway,
So I
so
think it's really good.
if you come to Atlanta, Just if someone says OTP or ITP, it means outside of the perimeter or inside of the perimeter. And it's basically the equivalent of like the green bubbles on iPhones and versus Androids. Getting the text chain and who's got the green bubble.
Yeah.
And anyway. But yeah, before we started, we were talking about you're thinking about specking out a new machine. It seems like a new laptop of some sort, or computer, or
my laptop. I mean, again, this is more of a luxury thing, I guess. My laptop is running kind of slow these days.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking about maybe getting a new one. I mean, here I am testing out. I think when it roughly I've been on the stream, I've been using my M1 for our streams, my Mac M1, but I definitely still prefer PC. And so when I'm doing other work or doing work outside of our stream, I usually am on my laptop, on my Windows-based laptop. And even now, even with Windows 11, I think it's the latest OS, whatever, I still like the OS. I still prefer to work in that environment. But yeah, I have noticed that. Yeah, I can bog down my machine pretty quickly. Then again, I can be pretty hard on my machine too. Like I have a lot of tabs open for my Chrome, stuff like that. But even when I'm opening up like Adobe Illustrator to work on vector art or something like that, it's starting to kind of get a little bit, bogged down. So I know you have a laptop and you're doing a lot of editing and stuff like that for your job, for example, stuff like that. These are all things that are similar to what I'm doing besides just drawing. And I haven't heard you say anything too negative in general for processing stuff or doing stuff on your machine. Now, whether there's other random stuff that goes on, like whether your fan went out and stuff like that, that's a whole other thing. But as far as just good old-fashioned just day-to-day work, seems like it's doing the job for you. So yeah, I was gonna nerd out with you and talk about specs, like what do you have on yours?
Yeah, so yeah, I could pull up the DX Diag if you want me to, but basically I've got an i5 processor. I'm not even running an i7 actually, and I'm running an integrated. What is it? Integrated? It's not integrated, but it is a laptop version of an NVIDIA GTX 3070 or 3080. I don't remember. Actually, I am going to do DX Diag right now.
Good old DX Diag.
And I've got. Let's see here. All right. Yeah. I'm running. Yeah. I actually am running an i7, a 2.2 gigahertz i7. I don't know why I thought I was running an i5. So I'm running an i7 at 2.2 gigahertz. I've got 32 gigs of RAM. Fully DirectX 12 enabled. I do have an integrated graphics card, but I don't use that because I've got the added. I've got it's a 3060, a GTX, or an RTX 3060, the laptop version of that graphics card. It was when I got this machine back in 2021. Yeah, that was a bleeding edge graphics card, right? It was basically the 3060 was as good as you could get in a laptop in 2021.
Okay.
Obviously, it's 3 years old now, but I will tell you that the 3060. I mean, we talked about Helldivers last week at length. I play that on max specs and have no frame rate issues running at max settings.
That's pretty dang cool, I think, especially for a computer that's now 3 years old, you said? Yeah.
Yeah, so I still run it at max settings and have no problems with it. The graphics card is about, I don't know, 22 gigs is what I'm looking at here.
Okay, 22 gigs of RAM? For the graphics card?
2 gigs of RAM. 2 gigs of RAM.
I was going to say, wow, that's crazy.
2 gigs of RAM. Sorry, I was doing my math wrong. Okay. But it's got 6 megs of, 55 gigs. Wait, is that right? I don't know. Anyway, I'm doing my math wrong. It's a good card, especially for a laptop. And so yeah, if that's what you're looking for, I mean, this is a machine that was bleeding edge in 2021 and is decidedly technically not bleeding edge anymore because I think Nvidia is up into the 4000 series of their RTX
Okay.
graphics card line.
Hmm.
But it's still, I mean, like I said, I haven't maxed out. I can set everything on most games that I play to ultra and have no problems with it.
Yeah.
And Helldivers 2, maybe it's not the most graphically intense, but it's no slouch in the graphics department. I'll tell you that much.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
I mean, my brief time playing it, I could tell that if you, because I'm playing on the PS5.
yeah.
And yeah, I mean, there's no need to set in the max settings on that on a console, but I could tell that yeah, if you want to do some stuff with it, especially with the higher number of enemies to fight and all the particle effects that are going on, it could be it could be an intensive game. I can
Mm-hmm.
imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So yeah,
yeah,
I mean, and I suspect that, I mean, I don't honestly, you laptops that are 3 years old, you can't find, right? Like, I mean, if you found this spec, it would probably at this point run you $500. Um,
yeah,
when I bought this, it was over 1,500. Um,
okay, yeah,
um, but yeah, I mean, as old as this is now, it probably is. It wouldn't be more than $500 or so.
hmm,
That being said, it still runs great. But we were talking about like just like building out a laptop versus a PC, and it's a little bit different, right? I mean, with PCs, you can kind of, assuming you have a case that can support it, you can basically put whatever you want into it, as long as the main board is compatible with with the RAM, etc., etc. Um, and the
you
laptop
talk
is a little bit
about
different.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then also and then we can go down. Then there's a whole other layer of complexity too, because you could. So, for example, my laptop that I'm using is an Asus. So Asus already spec'd everything out for me, and then and I happened to buy it. So oddly enough, I bought this Asus laptop. Oh, I would say 5, maybe 6 years ago now. At this point, feels like.
Yeah, that's ancient.
Yeah, it's ancient. It's an i7, all that stuff. It's again, it's okay if you want to surf the internet and stuff like that. But if you want to do anything intensive, it's starting to
Yeah.
show its age. Um, but sometimes I wonder, like, well, is it better, like, when I build a desktop PC, I have the past two iterations I've done it myself. I've actually built it from the ground up, and I enjoy that process a lot. I enjoy swearing and being frustrated and hoping it turns on, all that stuff. I think it's just very satisfying if you get everything to work right. I've been lucky with my last two builds, but now I'm a little bit. I still want to put time into doing that again. And also with a laptop, you kind of have everything sort of. You can kind of either buy a pre-built thing from a company like Asus or Lenovo or whoever, or you gotta go off another. Like there's some companies that actually let you kind of all like heart and pick stuff, right? And that's what you did with yours, right? You
Yes.
kind of spec'd it out yourself.
Yeah, I did spec it out myself to a certain extent. Like I said, you are limited in your options with a
Yeah,
laptop because you're trying to fit a lot of technology in a very small space, and so you don't have quite as many variety of things that you can use
hmm,
or choose from rather. But yeah, so what I went with is this company. I don't even remember what anymore, and I wouldn't recommend it anyway,
okay,
given all the hardware issues I've had with the machine. Um, but yeah, you have a drop down list, and basically you just build it. Um, I actually, it's interesting. I just did this for my job recently. We're putting together a small machine as a test machine,
an
and
inspect machine.
yeah, it's not a mid spec machine. It's just a mid spec machine,
Okay, all right.
just for testing purposes. And but the request was is to make it as small as possible so we could pick it up and move it places quickly, right? And
Hmm.
so I had one of the edicts was like using an ITX box versus an ATX box, and we're getting really really into the weeds here. But ATX versus ITX are different size
Hmm.
standards, right?
Yeah, you can make that's pretty much a mini PC versus a
A
standard.
standard
Yeah,
PC, right?
yeah.
And when you make an ITX, when you use an ITX case, you have to buy an ITX main board, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the full-size mainboards don't fit into an ITX case. This is so nerdy. Anyway,
And I'm here for it.
right.
So far so good. I think
So like
so.
with a full-size PC, when you're just running a full-size ATX case, you have a lot of flexibility, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you can
Mm-hmm.
buy a full-size main board that comes with a bunch of different PCI ports and a bunch of different RAM slots and a bunch of different SATA drive, blah 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 blah. I mean, you can like put whatever you want in it, right?
Yeah.
But those are also tend to be the most space intensive. Like those boxes tend to be really big, and so there is a market for smaller things, in particular laptops and ATX boxes. So when I was working with the building out a PC with an ITX case, you have to start with an ITX compatible main board, right? And so you have to. It's interesting. You have to be very conscious about the way things are laid out, right? So one of the biggest challenges for me was making sure that I got a CPU, making sure that the main board that I selected for this ITX case was structured in such a way that whatever CPU heat-seek fan I put on top of the CPU wouldn't obstruct or wouldn't conflict with the RAM slots. Because this is something that you have. This can be a problem in a box that small. If you just buy any other generic CPU heatsink and put it on your CPU, it might make it so that you can't put your RAM into the RAM slots, which isn't necessarily like a bad thing as long as you're aware of it. And so, like the install order would be that you put the RAM in before you install the CPU. But you have to think about all of these things. I did this. It took me an entire day to spec out this machine, right?
Wow.
Because I'm like literally looking, it's like, okay, what is the clearance on this one CPU fan? So I found a CPU fan that I really liked, had good reviews. All right, but then I had to check how tall is it? Because if it's too tall, it won't fit inside of an ITX case, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then B, I had to make sure that its clearance was high enough that I didn't have to buy special RAM, because you can buy special like slim silhouette RAM, so it's like shorter than a regular RAM chip or
That's
RAM
new. I haven't.
card.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, and so if I did all my measurements correctly, and I was like counting down to the millimeters, right? It should be fine. So I haven't heard if my boss is gonna, if if he's bought the pieces yet or not. But that is an ITX board that you can build yourself. Now imagine a laptop where everything has to fit in a third of that space, right? So I spent an entire day specking out an ITX PC, an ITX spec PC. So you can't really do that with laptops. Laptops you have to purchase from a manufacturer who has all of these specialty parts, right? And so when you get onto these, even like custom builds for laptops, you are limited in what you can spec out, right? And so you will go through this thing where you'll pick a main board, and then it'll tell you what kind of RAM works on the main board, what kind of graphics card, blah 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 blah, right? If for some reason you wanted a more traditional drive as opposed to a solid state M2 drive, like that's going to take up space, and then you also have to deal with the heat exchange on that, etc., etc., etc. Things like water cooling are obviously not a possibility on laptops, so you have to make sure that the fans are capable of moving enough air outside of, away from the CPU and the GPU, which are an inch or two apart from each other in a laptop, right? So there's no way without having a degree in electrical engineering that you could actually build your own laptop. And so the best you can do is just go to a manufacturer and just use their drop-down list to help guide you in how to build the laptop, right? And then they will take all these proprietary pieces, put it in a box, and then send it your way, right?
Okay. All right. So at this point, I'm going to look for a laptop now. Now the question is which company then? Like, which company would be the best way to go? Go back with an
Right.
Asus? You got an Asus. I have an Asus. you had good experience with your Asus until it conked out of you. It was during our first year of our stream, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, I know I've complained about it at great length. Yeah, when I first got it, it was fine, but then
Yeah.
everything kind of fell apart at the same time on it. The battery stopped charging. The fans, there was a ghost in the machine where the fan was always running at full speed, even though the temperature, there was no need for it to be running at that speed. No matter how hard I worked to sort of clean up the system, it was just, it took, towards the end, it took as long as like 5 minutes to boot up in a
Hmm.
functional way. It didn't help. I mean, this was back in 2020, 2021, and the machine at that point was already like 3 years old.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty old machine. But yeah, my experience with Asus is it works. They work fine until they don't work at all. Like there's
And they
no,
just completely,
they just
they just go.
completely craps out. Yeah, and so there's no middle ground with Asus. I can tell you from personal experience and from my buddy Jeff, who we all know, friend of the show.
Yeah. Hmm.
Don't ever buy Dell. Dell is just an absolute, from personal experience and from some of the shit that he's dealing with right now. Like Dell is
Hmm.
just awful. And he's
Oh,
running a full size. He's not running a laptop. He's running a full size PC.
okay.
Um, but yeah, like avoid Dell like the plague. I have an HP, it's like spare laptop, and that works okay. I don't have a I don't
Hmm.
I've not had a problem with it. Um, but yeah, I think unless you're gonna go, so I'm what I have is a Sager, which is this. It's like it's kind of like a it is a laptop brand, but it is kind of a fringe laptop brand. Like it's not particularly mainstream. For instance, when my fan broke on this machine that I'm running,
Hmm.
I went to Micro Center just because they have a repair department and there's one really close to my house. Um,
Hmm.
and I was like, "Here's my situation. I think the bearing is going out on my GPU fan, and I need to get a new one." And the guy's like, "Okay, hold on," and he typed some things in his computer. It's like, I need to go talk to my manager. They went and talked to his manager and came back. He's like, so we don't have an agreement with Sager. Like, it's not even in our system. So we can't even order the parts to fix it, even if you brought it in. So there's nothing we can do to help you, right?
Yeah.
And so if you go with a brand, you can get off-brand or not off-brand, but like fringe brand builds like what I've got.
Hmm.
But you do, like, if something goes wrong, unless you're really comfortable putting your guts in your machine, you have to send it back. And PC laptop repair tech support, I mean, it's never ending. I mean, like, you send it
Yeah.
off and it's gone for a month, 2 months, and it's like, who the hell knows when it's going to come back, right?
Hmm.
This laptop in particular, when I first got it, within I think the first week or two of me having it, we had, like, at my apartment there was some sort of an electrical storm, and the whole lights in my house flickered, and it,
Hmm.
it broke somehow it broke the fan, the CPU fan.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was like too intimidated to open up and see if I could replace it.
Hmm.
Um, and it was in warranty, so I was just like, screw it. I'll send it back and just deal with it that way. And it took a month and a half for the machine to come back, right? And it was all
Hmm.
fixed and everything. But then, yeah, a couple of, like, I'd say late last year in December or so, the bearing on my GPU fan, one of the bearings started going out and it started making this grinding, whirring noise that was so loud. I would be in my living room and I could hear my computer in my office from my living room. That's how loud it was.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was like, well, I can't be without a workable machine for a month. So and I also, it's not in warranty anymore, and I don't want to spend the money. So I'm gonna see if I can get this thing fixed, or I'm gonna see if I can do it myself. And so I, watched some YouTube videos and opened it up, and yeah, sure enough, it's like, yeah, okay, I can fix this. So I got on this like really sketchy Chinese OEM website, and I bought a GPU fan. and then started getting strange emails like asking for my phone number or stuff, and
Oh, jeez.
it was like, oh my god. But the fan showed up, and I popped it into the laptop, and everything works fine, and it's been working fine for over a month now. And now that I'm back in the games industry as my full-time job, I mean, I'm using this PC a lot, right? And famously, like Helldivers 3 is no slouch in the graphics part, or Helldivers 2 is no slouch in the graphics department. So I'm putting it through its paces there, and at this point, at least, the fan seems to be holding up. So
that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at this point, okay. So we know that. So your Sager, you're not going to recommend.
No, I'm not going to recommend Sager.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
honestly, Asus might be your best option.
Yeah. That's what it seems like from what you and I mean, just from what you're telling me. Do you know anything about Lenovo? I've never used a Lenovo before, so.
Lenovo, I have never used it in the capacity for. I mean, I don't know what you're. I mean, I assume you want to use it more for an editing kind of thing. Jeff is watching our stream apparently, and he just chatted us. He said, "Whatever you do, don't play Batman Arkham Knight on a Dell." Like, this is a whole thing. Like.
Man, what?
Okay. We do not have time to go over this story. It is this ongoing saga that is still ongoing for him, and I feel his pain so much. But yeah, he played Batman Arkham Knight for 5 minutes on his computer, and the whole thing died. Just catastrophic failure at every level.
So it sounds like he discovered a new Batman villain.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, it's called Dell Computers.
Yeah. We go the whole thing about Batman altogether, because I think you had on the Switch. I mean, Batman just had a bad run lately the past few months for the Asylum series anyway. So
yeah, that's fair. Especially it's been tainted because of the awfulness of Suicide Squad.
Yeah. So yeah. But yeah, Batman Arkham Asylum combining with a Dell computer, yeah, I would imagine that's a recipe for disaster anyway. I'm with you. I don't really trust those computers either. I remember when they first came out, it felt like it was a Gateway and Dell wars for a little while for desktop PCs, where you'd always see commercials from one of them. The Gateway, yeah.
Wow, that's a throwback. The cow. That's the one with the cow?
The cow, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oof, wow.
Yeah. That's always what I associate is that era where people didn't know what to do with the PC. Well, I'm gonna buy a Gateway or a Dell, I guess. And HP was kind of in that mix too, I guess, a little bit.
Well, going back to your Lenovo comment, I mean, I've used Lenovo laptops, but only as like work machines. Editing spreadsheets, surfing the internet. I've never used a Lenovo gaming laptop, so I can't. I have zero input for you on that one. So, check reviews, read reviews, things of that nature. It might give you some insight. But yeah, I mean, HP is fine, but I don't know. Sometimes HP is good, sometimes it's not. Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Definitely avoid Adele. Not Adele, the singer. She's amazing. Always.
Yeah, she is good singer. Yeah, yes. But the thing is okay. Here's where we get more into the weeds. So, like your Sega machine, I feel like because it's more of an offshoot brand or a brand that's not well known, you're not going to get as much bloatware in it either. Like where how they load up. Oh, you're going to love having a McAfee antivirus in your machine, whether you like it or not.
Yes.
And you try to uninstall it, and there's all this spider webs of entanglement of you want to remove that. Well, if you do that, you need to also remove this Google Chrome extension because it's attached to the McAfee environment. You know exactly what I mean. Like it just goes down this rabbit hole, just annoying.
You're not wrong.
Stuff.
I mean, when I got this laptop, it didn't even have Windows installed, right? I got it just as a dead machine. Like there was nothing on it. I had to get a USB drive, boot off of a USB drive with the Windows executable on it to install Windows. So it was. When I made this laptop, it was as clean as you could possibly have, as little bloatware as you could possibly have, and that is one of the benefits with going with like a fringe company because you actually can get it without anything installed, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's work involved
Um,
too because like I had to install Windows and then get the drivers installed for everything, and like there's a lot of manual labor involved in doing that, but there's as much manual labor involved in removing bloatware from a machine that they do
yeah.
pre-install everything. And yeah, this
Yeah.
my HP like backup laptop. I got it for my father. It's like a handy down for my dad. And the first thing I did is I just did, because Windows lets you do like a refresh, which just takes everything back to the system defaults.
Hmm.
But apparently, because it's an HP laptop, it auto installed when I installed Windows. It auto installed McAfee. It
Yeah.
auto installed. I mean, like
Of
there was
course.
all of this
Of course.
garbage from a
Yeah.
clean Windows 11 install.
Hmm.
And so after I did that, like it took me an hour to go through and just delete bloatware, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, okay. I mean, now that you mention it, I'm kind of talking myself in going with a fringe, like finding a fringe laptop manufacturer that will let you like just buy the hardware without any OS on it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is, yeah, you spend, yeah, just like what you said, you do spend so much time removing bloatware, things you don't want, and then you just don't know what's still lurking on the system that yeah,
Yeah.
that's the beauty of building your own machine. You get the OEM Windows disk, you insert it or USB stick, whatever you want to do. Everything that's on there is something of your doing, whether it's
Hmm.
terrible or not. You blow it up, it's your fault. But if it works and it's seamless, there's nothing else there to impair a process or something like that. But with laptops, you're always stuck with all these partnerships from other companies that want to make sure you can get your eyeballs on their little icon on your desktop
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
in the start menu.
No, they do.
Um,
There are some, and I'm forgetting it off the top of my head, and I'm not going to research it on right now. But there are some really good freeware applications that
mhm.
basically are auto bloatware removers,
Oh, nice.
and you just basically what it is you run it after you install it. You run it, and it goes through here's bloatware, here's bloatware, here's bloatware, and you check all the boxes of the software that you want to remove. Press the remove button, and it just automatically does it for you. Um,
Huh.
and I was too lazy to track it down and install it on the replacement laptop because I don't really care. It's just sort of a side machine anyway, kind of a worst case scenario kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, but uh, uh, yeah, so I mean, that is one thing you can do is once you get your new laptop, knowing full well that it's going to be filled with bloat, then you can find this freeware software, and I can track it down if you're interested. We can take it offline.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and yeah, yeah. So there you go. There's that.
yeah. So yeah, it sounds like Asus is kind of winning, but I remember having to deal with removing a bunch of stuff. So then part of me thinks, well, maybe I should just go with the Sager because I don't think you had to deal with it as much.
No, I mean
Um,
I didn't have to deal with any of that with Sager. So
even like the fancy ones like Alienware, they have a ton. It feels like they
oh,
have
they
a
have a
ton of stuff on
ton of
there now,
stuff. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
I
I,
mean
I don't want I don't want to deal with that.
like there's no way to avoid bloatware to a certain extent.
Yeah, yeah.
Because like the your graphics card Nvidia comes with bloatware. Microsoft comes with bloatware, right? I mean, it auto
Hmm.
installs Office 360, and if you don't want to use Office 360, you have to go through and remove it, right?
Hmm.
Um, you have to disable OneDrive. Microsoft automatically turns on OneDrive, but I use Dropbox. It's like I know Microsoft, I don't want
Oh,
you. You know what I'm saying?
jeez.
Um,
Yeah,
and so there's no avoiding the hassle of getting a new PC the way you want it. Um, you can minimize it though, yeah, by going with a more fringe builder.
yeah.
So
Well, the saga will continue. I'm going to research a little bit, and then occasionally during our streams, I'll bring up my status of what I'm going to do for a laptop PC. I mean, well, yeah, laptop PC. I'm definitely not going to go with the Mac. I already have my Mac Mini here. I'm good with it. Fine. I don't want more Macs in my life. I do like having a PC, regardless. So I'll figure that out. But yeah, some food for thought for sure. I definitely want to get. a decent graphics card like what you've got on your machine, that can kind of semi future proof it for a few more years, which is good.
Yeah, I at this point I would say in the next year or so, my 360 will probably start showing its age a little bit.
Yeah,
But at least for the time being, it's still holding strong. So if you, as long as you get anything above an RTX 360, you're probably in pretty good shape for a couple of years.
yeah, that's what it seems like. The fact that you're playing Helldivers 2 with ultra settings, that's always to me a great sign. And again, the main thing I want to do was just do Calamity Jane on my laptop, like we're doing tonight on the Mac Mini. I mean, I'm sorry, on my Mac M1 here. So I gotta say, I mean, a quick review, but this M1 has been great. For considering there's no dedicated graphics card or whatever,
Yeah, it's
it's
all
doing everything that I
integrated with a
needed to.
Mac. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So I do have to give kudos to that. Normally, I'm always trying to bash Apple stuff, but it's been terrific for production. So far, so good. I'm not doing anything too taxing. I'm doing like vector work and stuff like that. Nothing like 3D.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, doing this on my laptop, it's a little more of a pain. It's a little more sluggish for sure. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
am. Yeah, So yeah, I mean, honestly, the real reason I got this machine is because at the time I was doing a ton of editing, doing a ton of like editing shorts and filmed plays and things of that nature. And
Yeah,
my old machine, I mean, aside from all the other issues that it had, I would hit the render button on Premiere and I'd go get lunch because
yeah,
it
yeah,
would take
yeah.
an hour to render out a 15-minute short, you know. And so that was why I got like such a high end graphics card for the day, is because like I just wanted to reduce my render time.
hmm
And so after I got this machine and the first like short that I was editing, which is about 15 minutes, I rendered it out and like got up to go do something and it was already done. I was like, "Holy Christ!" I mean, I couldn't believe
Yeah.
it. I mean, it wasn't. It made it. I didn't realize how um, sluggish my old machine had become until I had rendered out my first video using the new
hmm
machine, and then it's like, well, I mostly got this um, for for editing and using all of the Creative Cloud stuff, right, which is very very graphics
hmm
intensive. And I'm like, well, I have this machine. I might as well just like use it for games too, right? And so,
Yeah.
like, I don't have a PS5 or an Xbox, whatever the new one's called, because like this laptop is still more powerful than either of those.
hmm
And I can just plug it into a TV, right? I mean, that's the benefit of it being a laptop, is I can just like pick it up and move it from my office into my living
Yep.
room and plug it into my television.
hmm
Um, and so yeah, so it's just like I haven't needed the current generation of consoles because I have this laptop, and it's like it pains me to say that because I've never been a PC gamer, and yet
Yeah.
somehow I have become one begrudgingly. Although I will say I don't use keyboard and mouse. I don't know why
hmm
anybody plays video games using word processing inputs, but whatever.
Wow, that's gonna stir a
Whew.
hornet's nest of
The PC
yeah.
Master Race will be mad at that one.
Hmm
Um,
For sure.
so I still use a controller, even though I'm playing
Okay,
on
so
PC.
which controller are you using?
I have this, and this is without a doubt the best controller I've ever used in my entire life. It's an Xbox One Elite controller. I got it on
Okay.
sale. I've had this controller for I don't know how many years now. This is a first gen Pro controller or Elite controller, and there's like they've made improvements, but I can't justify buying a new one because this one's fine.
hmm
But it's heavy. It weighs like almost a
hmm
full pound, right? So it's like
hmm
it feels good in your hands. Really nice textured grips. The buttons are nice and snappy. It comes with several
Yeah.
different thumbstick sizes, so you can like customize it to your desire.
hmm
Different D-pad settings. One of the best features of it is it comes with these removable paddle buttons on the bottom,
Okay.
which is particularly good for playing first-person shooters on console, because
hmm
what it means is you can. So one of the limits of playing a first-person shooter with a controller is there's got all these face buttons and your thumb has to go back and forth between the face
Yeah.
buttons and the thumbstick, and so that means you can't do things like reload and turn around at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. Except when you have these paddle buttons, then you can do all of that, right?
Huh.
And so it takes a little bit of training because instead of using just your two thumbs and two forefingers, you're using like 8 of your 10 digits to do this.
Wow.
Yeah,
That
but
sounds intense, man.
once you get your fingers trained to use like all of these fingers, um, it's amazing. And so like I'm a bumper jumper. What that means is you move it because like most first person shooters on console, the jump button is default on the A button, but I always
Okay.
go in and I change it so that the jump button is on one of the bumpers because that also
Okay.
makes things better, right? So you can like just tap the one of the shoulder buttons and jump, and then you can still move and look around at the same time.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it's a wonderful controller. The both the Xbox and the PC have this great Xbox controller app where you can actually tweak the decay curves and the dead
Oh my
zones
gosh.
and everything on them. And
Wow.
you even have like this is such a free ad for Microsoft right now, but this really is just an absolutely wonderful controller that I can't recommend enough. You probably can't see it, but you can change how the triggers are functioned, so you can do like a full depress trigger, or you can flip a switch and do a limited trigger, which is
Huh.
great for first-person shooters when you're using like semi-automatic rifles or something like that, and you
Hmm.
want to be able to pull the trigger faster.
Okay.
So when you set it up that way, it makes it so that you don't have to depress the analog trigger as
Okay.
far, and so it increases your fire rate it's like I'm
Oh wow.
super nerding out right now, but this thing
Wow.
it clearly was built by people who love video games
Yeah.
because it is just
Yeah.
it remains the best controller I've ever used, right? um, I mean, the PS5 controller is an excellent controller as well, but the Xbox Elite controller is still takes the cake. It's still hands down my favorite controller of all time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I think we. I think. I mean, I think you were very comprehensive in your discussion about controllers. I think if the. I think the debate's already settled. But I was going to go in and talk about my personal favorite controller, which is the Switch Pro controller. But just from what you
Mm,
told me, it doesn't. It's not gonna. It can't keep up with that.
no,
It's not even close.
not even
Um,
close.
no. Wow. Like what you just described. Those extra buttons do sound complicated, and that's a little intimidating.
It is
From
at
what you just,
first.
I mean, just hearing, it's like, yeah, but wow, that's intense.
My recommendation, because this is how I train myself on it, get Titanfall 2. I know you still haven't played Titanfall 2, which is a
Uh-huh.
crime against humanity because it remains maybe one of the greatest first-person shooters ever made.
Yeah.
Um, and then like get one of these elite controllers and then like play through the campaign on Titanfall 2, and by the end of it you'll be a master of it. You'll have your fingers trained 100%. That's how I got trained on the pro controller.
That's something to think about. I might do that. I have this. I have. I mean, I think I've talked about this before. I have motion sickness issues with
Yeah,
FPS games in general,
yeah, that's
so
true.
I never get a chance to
Oh, that's
really.
true. I keep forgetting
Yeah,
that.
so I miss
Oh
out. So that's why
man.
Helldivers is great. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I miss out on so many cool games. I'm willing to withstand it, like playing Metroid Prime, but I have to wait for a game to have so many accolades and know that I have to play it and it has to be a must play, such as Metroid Prime, that I will actually sit down and play it and
All right.
sacrifice being sick for a couple hours. But
I'm
if
gonna
you're
say
saying
it. I'm
Titanfall
gonna say
2,
it. Yeah. Titanfall 2 is
what?
worth being sick over. It is
Oh, wow.
a phenomenal. I actually like talking about it right now. I kind of want to like go and replay the campaign again. I played the. I mean, Titanfall is a phenomenal multiplayer first person shooter. One of my favorites of all time. I suspect the
Hmm.
online community for it is pretty dead now because that game came out what 2016, 2015, something like that.
Okay. All
Titanfall 2.
right.
Um, but it remains one of my favorite first person shooter campaigns of all time.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
just some of the level design, some of the um, some of the gimmicks, right? Like the two big gimmicks of Titanfall were like wall running and the giant mechs, and
Okay.
they
Yeah.
utilized both of those so intensely well. I really it's just like such a glowing review, but it is true. I mean, it is about as good a of that style first person shooter, right? Where it's not like the Doom 16 reboot, which is just I think what's been coined now a boomer shooter, right? Like
Yeah,
that's the new
term for us. Yeah.
jargon for that subgenre.
Hmm.
So it's not quite a boomer shooter, but it is
Yeah.
much more high intensity than most first person shooters of that era were.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
again,
Well.
Titanfall 2 is definitely worth getting sick over.
Well, there we go. There we go. The official verdict is in. That's the next FPS game I may have to sit down and play.
Yeah.
When I wrap up the other games I'm currently working on. So to say, like, what we could probably wrap up here tonight
Okay.
where we're at, and we could kind of continue this into next week. But I just want to show here was the animatic. It was literally just two drawings here of her going up, the Calamity going up,
Mm-hmm.
and now here is going to be the finished artwork of it. Um, yeah, the Calamity's going up, and she settles in, and she's ready to go.
She's actually animating
So
into position.
she's animating into position. She actually has a couple extra poses, just not that many. We still have like a primary pose, and I just kind of
Mm-hmm.
tweaked it a little bit. And then if you see here, we do a jump. Like well, it's a huge jump, but because it's so fast, we can get our eye will fill in the gaps. At least that's the hope. But for me, this feels pretty good for getting you prepared for the next shot. So I
Excellent.
suspect most viewers will feel the same way, and it won't be too jarring for them not seeing that extra pose here. I could draw an extra pose in here, but I like the fact that it's pretty snappy. And it's part of the style of the show anyway, is to kind of have it a little bit kind of messy in some spots and not be completely fluid or perfect. Because quite honestly, our animation team is pretty small, and we've got to make the best of our time as much as we can.
Indeed.
But yeah, so that's where we're at for tonight. I think we're in good
All
shape.
right. All right. Well, on that note, then I'll tell Jeff that I feel his pain in terms of his computer, and I hope for a swift recovery because that has been a saga, a never-ending saga. It feels like.
Oh man,
Um,
yeah,
but beyond that, why don't y'all head on over to calamityjane.rocks? That'll take you to our Patreon site. Please consider subscribing and helping us make this cartoon a reality. We're going to give away a bunch of good goodies for anybody who signs up and joins us on this adventure. You can also find us on Facebook and YouTube, which presumably you have because you're watching this right now. But we're also on Instagram. We have an Instagram page where we update with like behind the scenes shots and some of the making of working animations and images. That's at Calamity Jane Salamander. You can check that out there. And otherwise, we'll be back next week at the same Calamity time, same Calamity channel. Unless James, you have something to tell me that I'm not aware of.
nope.
All
All
right,
systems go for next week. We'll
sounds
catch up next
good.
week. We'll talk more. We'll discuss more controllers. Second place controllers, because then maybe I can talk about the
Probably
Nintendo Pro
PlayStation
controller.
5. PlayStation 5, the DualSense or whatever, I don't even know what it's called, but yeah, that's a phenomenal controller. Anyway, we can talk
Yeah.
about that later. Anyway, so thanks for joining us, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Stay safe out there. We'll talk to you soon. Good night.
Good night.